Is walking dogs and come in.
That's okay. You know, I hate to think she wasn't coming.
No, it's just hard to speak to her. She said she'd get it, and then let's look at it.
Just about anything underway with the question and answer session. Does anyone want to start us off? Gentleman there, Mrs. Jump on here.
I've just decided yes, so I'm going to ask a quick question because I think people that are undecided can ask questions. And I just went to yes and coming out, whatever it's called. Coming out for yes. That's what I'm doing. It's just yes. So we wake up on the 19th, and much to our amazement or whatever, we're an independent nation and we're all full of pride and we're all happy and big party and all the rest of it. And we join Norway and maybe Jersey and a few other places like whose sustainable, feasible economies. And meanwhile, you know, England joins Greece and a few other places and goes down the pan. And so it's like the question goes something like, because I have grandchildren down in England. I know I don't look old enough, but I do have grandchildren in England. And I actually care about my neighbours a lot and about my grandchildren. And I'm just thinking that, you know, what's going to happen to, like, you know, what's going to happen to Europe if there's just a few very small, stable countries left here? And I don't really know how to frame this question, but if I could just put that out there and somebody could maybe do something with it and reassure me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've got business in England, I've got family in England, and I understand exactly what you're saying. England's Scotland's biggest trading partner, and it's important for us that England, as a market, as a trading partner, is successful as well. I think that there's a number of ways to look at that. One is there's a nice quote from Robin McAlpine where he talks about the UK being like a jail with a serial killer in charge of it. But we are Scotland small enough to escape out the window and run away and get help. So it's the point being that there's a lot of folk in England that feel very much like we do as well, and would like to make changes to the Westminster system, and Scottish independence could be the shock that drives that. In terms of the wider economy of Europe, I mean, sure, there's been a crash and folk are recovering from that, but what you tend to get on your TV screen is your Greece and your Spain and stuff like that. There's an awful lot of countries that have went into the recession much less severe than the UK did, came out of the recession a lot faster than the UK did. I'm talking about Scandinavia, countries right across, and talk about your Austria, Switzerland, whatever countries, Germany obviously, driving stuff forward. And countries in Eastern Europe, Poland went through it with decent growth rates right through the recession, and it's hardly missed a beat. So there's a lot of parts of Europe that have done better than we have, a lot better than we have through it, and it's picking up in general. So the economy is maybe not as bad as you're painting out to be. Sure, Scotland can do very well, but in general, yeah, there's some issues, but it's not maybe as bad as you're painting. I don't know if that answers your question.
Any other questions? The gentleman there in the white shirt.
Reindustrialisation. I'd love to see it. You've got a map showing that the people with the money who might be prepared to invest are in the southeast of England. How are you going to get investment for reindustrialisation?
Investors invest where they're going to get a return, okay, and they don't really care what country it's in. It's very much an international business. And government's got a big part to play in it, policy's got a big part to play, industrial policy, a focus on sectors that you want to work and be successful in. and government driving that, and government pump priming it to make it happen. Because if you look at the countries that have been successful, I talked about Norwegian shipbuilding as an example. You talk about Finland, a country I spent a year working in, higher labour costs than Scotland and the rest of the UK, with a manufacturing sector that's double the size of what we've got, because they've got a focus and a policy of having an industrial sector in the sectors they think they'll be successful in, and not only that, spreading it right through the country. And I worked in the north of Finland, in a small town of 5,000 people. There was 2 metal manufacturing factories in that small town, each employing more than 200 people. It's quite incredible the way they've got that business spread throughout the whole country. And getting back to what Finland did as an example, the Soviet Union was their biggest market. When it went down in the 1990s, they said, what are we going to do? Mobile technology is an up-and-coming thing. Let us go and take an old rubber manufacturing company called Nokia and turn it into a world leader in telecoms. So if you've got a focus and a government that wants to make things happen, it's got the policies and puts the investment to make things happen, you can do stuff. If you think that you're going to keep getting money from the City of London as your tax base, and that's your biggest sector, and that's what you focus on, then you'll end up where we've ended up.
Yep. Can I worked in the Arab world for the last 15 years before I retired, and I know where there's a great deal of investment. And in the book I wrote, I dealt with the 157,000 families in Scotland without a home, and how do we create a sufficient house building programme to actually solve their problem. And of course that means, where do you get investment? Well, there's Islamic investment in Abu Dhabi, for example, and Qatar and in Kuwait. But let's deal with Abu Dhabi. They have a sovereign fund in Abu Dhabi. They also have the Islamic Development Bank in Abu Dhabi. And how they operate is on a thing called a sukuk. Now, you've never heard of it, because there's no reason why you should. And I've been involved in sukuks. Islamic finance is different from Western finance. They do not take interest. What they do is they invest in a project, and they expect to get a profit out of it, and if there's a loss, well, they accept that they take a loss. And there is no great problem. As a matter of fact, David Cameron's government launched a 296 million sukuk in London last year. So, you know, it can be done, no problem. And you're dealing with Scotland with 15% of its GDP, an oil nation, going to Abu Dhabi, where almost 100% of its GDP is based in oil. They understand it very well. The other thing the Arabs like is actually buildings. You know, I've talked about the Arab culture now. They like solid things that you can invest in. And of course, if we go to them and raise the money to build houses, they first of all have collateral that they think is good. That's houses. Those houses pay rent. And from that rent, you take a portion to give them their share out of their investments. So without going to the so-called Western financial markets, we can actually go to an entirely different source of investment. And it's exactly the same in the argument I've used to set up a Scottish National Oil Corporation. Somebody said to me, but how can you do that from scratch? Well, what you do actually is you buy an oil company operating at the present time. Nothing unusual in that. Oil companies aren't something special. There are companies bought and sold all over the world almost every week, and that includes oil companies. So we can borrow the money from Abu Dhabi to actually buy an oil company, and the Abu Dhabians have their share on our profits. But that way, we kick-start a Scottish National Oil Corporation so that we're taking on a company already in the business. So we don't need to go through the big learning curve. And we use their experience and do the stuff I'm talking about of oil and gas in the Clyde. One of the things Margot said was that one of the great things when we regain our self-respect and self-confidence, that from that comes imagination. And when I moved from being a unionist to somebody in favour of independence, I found I could think of doing things I couldn't think of doing before. When we vote yes, we have an open book to write our own programmes, and that's very important to understand that.